I didn't cry anymore, not the way I used to. Somewhere along the way, I learned how to hurt quietly, how to tuck my sadness into corners where no one could see it. The house stayed clean, the food warm, the routine polished. To everyone else, we looked like a perfectly normal couple. But Leonardo? He had this way of making me feel invisible while pretending I was adored. And when he strayed, again and again, he'd say things like, "You'll never find anyone better than me." Like that was supposed to comfort me. Sometimes I believed him. Or maybe I was just too tired to believe in anything else. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. She looked so capable, so put together, but inside I felt hollow. I told myself I was staying for the sake of our daughter, for the house, for stability. But the truth? I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of being alone, scared that maybe, just maybe, he was right, and I wasn't worth more. Then came that evening. I was picking up Maya's toys in the living room, lost in thought, when I felt her tug on my sleeve. Just a gentle touch, like she didn't want to interrupt. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked, "Mommy, why are you always sad when you think no one's looking?" I swear my heart didn't just crack, it collapsed. That one question cut through every excuse I'd ever made. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. For the first time in years, I couldn't lie to myself. I didn't answer her right away. How could I? What do you say when your child sees through the armor you've spent years perfecting? I knelt beside her and held her face in my hands, trying to smile. But I saw it, the worry behind her innocence, the way her little fingers reached for mine like she was the one trying to comfort me. That's when I realized something terrifying. My sadness wasn't invisible. It was teaching her something I never meant to pass down. She was only 8, but children have this way of knowing the truth, don't they? No matter how gentle our lies, they feel what we bury. I thought I was protecting her by staying, keeping the family together, shielding her from the chaos. But in that moment, I saw what I'd really been doing. Showing her a version of love that came with pain, silence, and pretending. And that terrified me more than any lonely night ever could. Because if I stayed, she'd think this was normal. I tucked her into bed that night and watched her sleep, her little hands curled into fists, like she was still holding on to me even in her dreams. And I just stood there, completely still. Because somewhere deep inside me, a part of me was waking up, the part I'd buried under all the fear and compromise. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have answers. But I did have a question echoing in my mind now, just like hers. Why am I always sad when no one's looking? And suddenly, not knowing wasn't enough anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed beside Leonardo, listening to his breathing, feeling the distance between us stretch like a canyon. He turned away, as he always did, and I stared at the ceiling, eyes wide open, heart pounding. Not with fear this time, but with something else. A question, a spark, a quiet knowing. What if my daughter deserved a version of me that wasn't always hurting? What if I did too? I thought about the woman I used to be, before him. God, she was bold. She laughed without apologizing. She had plans. She believed in her own worth. Somewhere along the way, I handed pieces of her away, thinking love meant sacrifice, thinking endurance was strength. But looking at Maya's little face, I realized she doesn't need a mother who survives. She needs one who lives, one who shows her that love should feel safe, not small. That night, something shifted. I didn't make any big moves. I didn't pack a bag or slam a door. But inside me, the ground began to move. Something cracked open. It wasn't a decision yet, not quite. But it was a beginning. Because when your own child holds up a mirror to your pain, you can't look away forever. And whether I was ready or not, I knew the question had been asked, and now I had to find the answer. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, just staring. I touched my face like I was trying to recognize it. Not the makeup or the lines that time left behind, but me, the woman I used to be. I could still see her in there, buried under layers of compromise and quiet suffering. She hadn't vanished. She'd just gone silent. And suddenly, I missed her. God, I missed her so much. Before Leonardo, I was full of life. I danced barefoot in the kitchen, I read books just because they made me feel something, and I dreamed out loud. I was ambitious, fierce even. But somewhere along the way, I dimmed my own light to make space for his shadow. Every time he cheated and told me I was lucky he stayed, I believed a little less in myself. And every time I forgave him, it wasn't because I trusted him. It was because I doubted me. I started thinking about all the things I'd given up in the name of love. Friendships I let fade, job offers I declined, opinions I swallowed. And all the times I looked the other way, just to keep the peace. But there's no peace in losing yourself, is there? There's only numbness. A slow, quiet erosion of who you are. I didn't leave him back then because I was afraid I couldn't survive alone. But that night, looking at my reflection, I saw something terrifying. I wasn't surviving with him either. I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours, knees pulled to my chest, the cool tiles pressing against my skin. And in that stillness, a truth began to rise. Not loud, but steady. If I stay, Maya will grow up thinking love looks like this. A woman shrinking. A home built on silence. Smiles that don't reach the eyes. And I couldn't stand the thought of her mistaking survival for happiness. Of her thinking that this was what a mother should look like when she loves. She watches me more than I realized. The way I bite my lip when I'm anxious. The way I move quickly to clean up his messes. Not just around the house, but in conversation, in mood, in energy. And I wondered what she was learning. That love means disappearing? That kindness means swallowing your voice? That being a woman means enduring until there's nothing left? No. No. I couldn't let her carry that forward like some inherited curse. And then I thought about her future, the woman she'd become. One day, someone might hurt her. Someone might try to convince her she's not enough. And if I stayed in this, what would I have taught her? To accept it? To make herself smaller, quieter, more obedient? That night, I didn't have a roadmap, but I did have a promise. I wouldn't let my daughter confuse pain with love, and to do that, I had to stop doing it myself. I went to bed that night with my heart pounding, but not from fear, from awareness. Like something inside me had shifted into place, quietly but firmly. I didn't tell Leonardo. He kissed me on the cheek, distracted, already half asleep, and I just watched him. I wondered how many years I'd spent trying to make him love me better, when I should have been learning to love myself louder. For the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for his hand. I pulled the blanket tighter around my own body. That small gesture felt like the beginning of something. And in the darkness, I started remembering the woman I used to be. Not in pain, but with a kind of reverence. Like I was unearthing a version of myself I had once loved deeply. The one who laughed at her own jokes, the one who didn't apologize for taking up space. She was still there, somewhere beneath the layers of guilt and doubt and silence. And I was going to find her again, piece by piece, no matter how long it took. Because I wanted Maya to know that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You deserve more." So I laid there, staring at the ceiling, no longer numb. I wasn't ready to leave yet, not physically. But emotionally, the first wall had cracked. And once that happens, you can't pretend it didn't. You can't unsee your own worth once it shows itself. Something inside me had been buried for so long, I'd forgotten how to feel it. But now that it was stirring again, I couldn't look away. Not for him. Not for fear. Not anymore. I started small. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just little things, like texting an old friend from college I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name popped into my mind while I was making coffee, and without overthinking, I hit send. It felt strange at first, like I was reaching across a canyon I wasn't sure I could cross. But when she replied, warm, surprised, genuinely happy to hear from me, something flickered inside. I hadn't realized how much I missed being seen, just for who I was. Then came the resume. God, I stared at that blank document for hours, unsure of where to begin. It had been so long since I even thought about my own career, my own goals. But I opened my laptop anyway, fingers trembling slightly, and typed my name. Just that, Carla Mendez. And there it was, a beginning, a reminder that I wasn't just a wife or a mother or someone constantly trying to manage another person's chaos. I was still a woman with skills, with ambition, with value. I found a therapist online one afternoon while Leonardo was at work. My palms were sweating just making the call. I wasn't sure what I was even going to say. But when the receptionist answered, I heard myself ask for an appointment. Just like that. And after I hung up, I cried. Not from fear this time, but from a strange kind of relief. Like I was finally letting someone help me hold what I'd been carrying alone for so long. Quiet steps, yes. But every one of them felt like a crack of light through a locked door. I became meticulous, almost methodical, not out of paranoia, but out of purpose. I started keeping a folder, locked and hidden, filled with screenshots, emails, credit card statements. Every late-night message Leonardo thought I'd never see, every hotel receipt he didn't bother hiding. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for clarity. For the day I would need to look at the truth without flinching. The day I'd stop gaslighting myself into believing things weren't as bad as they felt. Each time I printed another page, I felt a strange mix of grief and strength. Grief for the years I'd given to a man who never really chose me. Strength because I was finally choosing myself. I found a lawyer through a woman in my therapy group. Quiet, brilliant, direct. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me like someone who had done this before, many times, and lived to tell. And in that first meeting when she said, "Whenever you're ready," I knew. I was getting close. At night, I read to Maya with more intention. Stories about brave girls and kind hearts, about finding your voice and standing your ground. And I watched her, how she leaned into me, how she laughed at the funny parts, how her breathing slowed when I whispered the last line. I wondered if she could sense it, the shift in me. I wasn't just reading anymore. I was becoming the kind of woman the heroines in those stories would look up to. And for the first time in a long time, I liked who I was becoming. During the day, I moved like a woman with secrets, not shameful ones, but sacred. I started taking long walks while Maya was at school, breathing in the air like I hadn't in years. I noticed things again, the rustle of trees, the smell of jasmine near the corner cafe, the way my shoulders finally sat a little lower, like the weight was beginning to lift. I wasn't free yet, but I was waking up to the idea that freedom was possible, that maybe I didn't have to ask for it. I could claim it. Leonardo hadn't noticed. Not really. He was too distracted, too used to my silence to realize it had started to carry a different tone. I no longer asked where he was going. I no longer flinched when he came home late. My power wasn't loud or confrontational, it was calm. And in that calm, I began to feel dangerous, in the best way. I was building something, slowly and carefully, like a woman preparing for a storm, But this time, not to survive it. To end it. The pieces were falling into place. I had support. I had proof. I had a plan. But more than that, I had something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And while Leonardo made his usual plans for their upcoming anniversary, I was making mine too. Except mine didn't involve pretending. Mine involved truth. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. The morning of our anniversary felt still. Not peaceful, not quite, but intentional. I woke up before the sun, made coffee the way I like it, and watched the steam rise as I sat in silence. Leonardo was still asleep. His face looked soft, almost innocent, like he wasn't the man who had made me question my worth for over a decade. But I wasn't fooled anymore. That version of me, the one who needed his approval to feel enough, she didn't live here anymore. I dressed with care, not to impress him, but to remind myself of who I'd become. A fitted black blouse, dark jeans, my wedding ring left sitting on the dresser. He noticed, of course. Said I looked nice in that offhanded way he had. I nodded and smiled, saying thank you without letting the compliment settle. I wasn't hungry, but I made breakfast for Maya and packed her lunch with her favorite snacks. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You smell happy today." And for the first time in years, I was. That evening, he had made dinner reservations, some upscale place we'd gone to once when we still pretended to like each other in public. He thought it would be like always, a performance. We'd smile for strangers, drink wine we couldn't pronounce, and ignore the hollow space between us. But I had other plans. I brought a folder in my bag, neatly labeled. Divorce papers, copies of emails, bank records. Everything he never thought I'd have the courage to hold, let alone hand over. He ordered for me, like he always did. Steak, medium well, as if I hadn't stopped eating red meat months ago. I didn't correct him. Let him play his part, one last time. The waiter poured the wine, and Leonardo launched into some rehearsed speech about reconnecting, about fresh starts, all with that charming smile he wore when he wanted something. I nodded, let him speak, my hands resting calmly on my lap. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I was just done. When the main course arrived, I reached into my bag. I didn't make a scene. No tears, no raised voice. I simply slid the folder across the table and watched his expression change. Slowly at first, then all at once. He flipped through the pages, his mouth tightening, eyes scanning for denial, for escape, for control. But there was none left to find. I took a sip of water, folded my hands, and waited. For the first time in our marriage, he was the one with nothing to say. And when he finally looked at me, stunned and pale, I met his gaze without blinking. "You always said no one else would love me," I said quietly. "But you forgot something important." I paused, not for effect, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the words I was about to say. "I already have someone who does. Maya. And now, I'm learning to love myself too." I didn't need applause. I didn't need his reaction. The power wasn't in what he did next. It was in what I had just done. He tried to speak, some blend of defense and disbelief, but I stood up before the excuses could take shape. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. Just finished. There's a silence that comes when a woman finally chooses herself. It's not cold. It's clean. I left the folder on the table, untouched steak cooling on my plate, and reached for my coat. He didn't follow me. Maybe for the first time, he understood that I wasn't bluffing, that the woman he thought would never leave had already gone. Outside, the night air was crisp. I walked to the car where Maya was waiting with my sister, her little face lighting up when she saw me. "Did you have a nice dinner?" she asked, kicking her feet from the back seat. I smiled and brushed her hair off her forehead. I did exactly what I needed to, I told her. She didn't ask more, and I didn't explain. She didn't need to know the details, only that I was different now, that the story was changing. I drove us home, to our home. A small apartment we had quietly rented 2 weeks earlier. The furniture was mismatched, the walls still bare, but it was peaceful in a way our house had never been. Maya curled up beside me on the couch, blanket pulled to her chin, and whispered, "I'm glad we're here." I kissed her temple, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to apologize for anything. I had walked away from a life that almost broke me, and for once, I wasn't looking back. The mornings feel different now. There's a softness to them, not because life is suddenly easy, but because it's finally mine. I wake up before Maya and brew coffee while the sun spills through our kitchen window, warming the chipped counter and mismatched mugs. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It's gentle, freeing. I play music while I cook breakfast. Nothing fancy, just eggs and toast. And I catch myself humming along. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I did that. Our little apartment is far from perfect, but it feels like home in a way the old house never did. I've started a small business from our living room, organizing home spaces for other women who feel buried under chaos. It's slow, humble work. But it's mine. Every client, every dollar earned, feels like a quiet declaration. I'm rebuilding. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything. Just because I finally believe I'm worth investing in. And I want Maya to grow up seeing that. Sometimes I catch her watching me, the same way she used to, but now with something softer in her eyes, like she sees me differently, like I see me differently. And one night, as we baked cookies, she looked up from the mixing bowl and said, "You smile more now, Mommy. You laugh out loud." I didn't even know what to say. My throat tightened, my hands stilled. All I could do was smile back at her, heart wide open. Because she was right. I had come back to life, and she had noticed. I pulled her into my arms, flour still on my hands, and kissed her forehead. "Because now I'm free," I whispered. "And I promise you, I'll never choose fear over joy again." She didn't respond with words, just wrapped her arms around my waist and held on, like she believed me, like she felt the difference. And I stood there in that tiny kitchen, holding my daughter, thinking about how far we'd come. Not just in distance, but in truth. Fear used to run my life. It told me I couldn't do better. That I wasn't enough. That leaving would break everything. But it was staying that nearly broke me. Now, when I look around, at the laundry basket on the floor, the shoes by the door, the sticky notes on the fridge, I don't see chaos. I see freedom. I see a life I'm choosing every single day. Not out of desperation, but out of hope, out of belief, and more than anything, out of love. It's not perfect. Some nights I still feel the ache of what I lost. There are bills, long days, and moments where I wonder if I'm getting it all right. But then I hear Maya laugh from the other room, or she calls out, "Mom, come see this." And I remember, I didn't just leave something behind. I walked toward something too. A version of life where love doesn't hurt, where I can breathe, where my daughter is safe. And I am too. Tonight, after Maya went to bed, I sat on the couch alone with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker through the window. No noise, no tension, just peace. I scrolled through the photos on my phone, landing on the one I took earlier. Me and Maya in the kitchen, covered in flour, mid-laugh, both of us looking completely alive. I stared at it for a moment, then opened a message to my lawyer, attached the photo, typed one simple line beneath it. This is what winning looks like, and it is. Not the kind of winning that comes with applause or spotlights, but the quiet, defiant kind, where you reclaim your voice, your name, your joy. where you stop surviving and start living, where you become the kind of mother, woman, and soul that your younger self would be proud of. I didn't get here overnight. It took pain. It took reckoning. It took a question from an 8-year-old that shattered my world and saved me. I still don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I will never again trade myself for the illusion of love. I will never again stay where I'm not seen, and I will raise my daughter to believe in joy, not fear, in strength, not silence. What stayed in the end wasn't pain or bitterness. It was love. Real love. The kind that holds your hand in the dark and says, "We're okay now." And finally, we are.
Diane, we appreciate your years of service, but it's time for fresh perspectives. Your role is terminated effective immediately. The words hung in the air between us like stale perfume. Across the sleek conference table, Jillian Ames sat with perfect posture, her expression professionally neutral. At 42, she was 17 years my junior, with credentials from prestigious consulting firms and an MBA from an Ivy League university that she managed to mention in every company meeting. I didn't blink. Instead, I stood, extended my hand, and said, "Wishing you and the company continued success." My voice remained steady, betraying none of the anger churning inside me. Jillian exhaled, a subtle release of tension that told me she'd expected tears, pleading, or at least some resistance. She shook my hand briefly, her grip loose and non-committal. "Human resources will assist with your transition. We're offering 6 months severance, which is generous considering company policy." Her tone suggested I should be grateful for this pittance after 25 years of service. "My name is Diane Mullins. I'm 59 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the Vice President of Partnerships at Silverstone Naturals. I had joined when we were just a modest wellness brand operating out of a converted warehouse in Dallas, Texas. In those early days, we had 3 product lines in distribution in exactly 47 stores. Now, our organic supplements and wellness products appeared on shelves in over 5,000 retail locations nationwide. I'd negotiated every major partnership that built this company. When larger competitors tried to squeeze us out of prime shelf space, I was the one who found creative solutions. When supply chain issues threatened our growth during the pandemic, I secured alternative materials without compromising quality. As I packed my office, the corner space I'd earned through years of dedicated service, I gazed at the awards on my wall. Excellence in Business Partnership, Vendor of the Year, Outstanding Contribution to Industry Standards. Each accolade represented countless hours of work, relationship building, and strategic thinking. My assistant, Catherine, appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Everyone's talking about it. Nobody understands why." I smiled gently. "It's business, Catherine. Nothing personal." But we both knew that wasn't true. Jillian had been systematically removing the old guard since her arrival 6 months ago. My termination was simply the latest in her campaign for fresh perspectives, her favorite euphemism for ageism. As I carried my box of belongings toward the elevator, I passed the gleaming sign that read, "Silverstone Naturals, Wellness Without Compromise." I couldn't help but think that some compromises were evidently acceptable after all. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. The first warning sign appeared when Jillian arrived at Silverstone Naturals last October. The board had hired her with great fanfare, touting her as a transformational leader who would take our company to the next level in the competitive wellness market. At her welcome reception, I extended my hand and introduced myself. "Diane Mullins, Vice President of Partnerships. I've been with Silverstone for 25 years. Looking forward to working together." She smiled, but her eyes assessed me coolly. "Wonderful to meet you, Diane. 25 years, that's impressive loyalty. I'm excited to bring some fresh energy to our strategies." Fresh energy. It seemed innocent enough then. But within weeks, Jillian hired 3 consultants from her previous firm. They conducted what she called a talent landscape assessment, essentially evaluating every executive and director-level employee. I noticed they spent considerably more time with the younger team members. During my evaluation interview, the lead consultant asked, "How do you stay current with digital marketing trends?" And, "Are you comfortable with rapid technological changes?" The questions felt pointed, designed to expose perceived generational weaknesses. At dinner that evening, I mentioned my concerns to my husband, Robert. "I think they're building a case against the older executives," I said, pushing my salad around the plate. Robert squeezed my hand. "You've survived 4 CEOs and 2 acquisitions. You'll outlast Jillian, too." I wasn't so sure. The following week, Thomas Grayson, our 62-year-old chief operations officer, was encouraged to retire. A 36-year-old from Jillian's former consulting firm replaced him. 2 weeks later, our 57-year-old marketing director was restructured out of her position. Despite these warning signs, I had one source of comfort. 5 years earlier, I had made a strategic personal investment that was now proving more valuable than ever. Through careful financial planning and some inheritance money from my mother, I had acquired a significant silent stake in CoreLogic's Distributors, the company that handled 70% of Silverstone's national fulfillment contracts. It had been a calculated risk. I saw how dependent Silverstone had become on CoreLogic's specialized services and nationwide infrastructure. Our wellness products required temperature-controlled environments, specialized handling, and precise delivery schedules. Finding an alternative would be nearly impossible without significant disruption. No one at Silverstone knew about my investment. I had established a holding LLC called Meadowlark Ventures to manage my business interests outside the company. It was perfectly legal and ethical. I had disclosed having outside investments without specifying what they were, as per company policy. I never imagined this silent investment would become my insurance policy. The morning after my termination, I woke at 6 as usual. For the first time in 25 years, I had nowhere to go. The house felt eerily quiet without the usual rush to prepare for work. I made coffee and sat on my back porch, watching the sunrise and contemplating my uncertain future. At 59, I was technically too young to retire, but old enough to face significant challenges in the job market. I knew the statistics. The average job search for executives over 50 lasted nearly a year, twice as long as for younger counterparts, and most ended up accepting positions with lower compensation and status than their previous roles. Robert joined me on the porch, coffee in hand. "What's next?" he asked, his voice gentle. I sighed. "I don't know yet, but I'm not done." My phone buzzed with a text message from Harold Peters, CoreLogic's CEO. "Heard what happened. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. at Giovanni's." Harold and I had a unique relationship. While he knew me as a Silverstone executive, he was also aware that I was a significant investor in his company through Meadowlark Ventures. We maintained strict boundaries between these 2 roles, never discussing proprietary information that would create conflicts of interest. That evening at Giovanni's, a quiet Italian restaurant in downtown Dallas, Harold greeted me with a sympathetic embrace. 25 years, and that's how they thank you? Shameful. As we settled into our booth, Harold got straight to the point. "Jillian Ames called me this morning. Wants to review our partnership agreement and explore more favorable terms. Translation: she wants to cut costs at our expense." I nodded, unsurprised. That's her style. Quick wins to impress the board without considering long-term consequences. Harold sipped his wine. "Our contract with Silverstone comes up for renewal in 4 months. Normally, I'd start preliminary discussions now to ensure continuity." "And what are you thinking?" I asked, careful to maintain the boundary between my roles as investor and former Silverstone executive. As CEO, I need to protect CoreLogic's interests. Silverstone wants premium service at budget prices. That's not sustainable for us. He paused. "As a major investor, I wanted you to know we're considering non-renewal, if Jillian insists on renegotiating terms downward. The implications were clear. Without CoreLogics, Silverstone would face significant disruption. Finding a replacement distributor with comparable nationwide infrastructure would take months, if not longer. Retailers wouldn't wait. They'd reduce Silverstone's shelf space and give it to competitors who could reliably deliver. I took a thoughtful sip of my wine. Harold, I trust you to make the right decision for CoreLogics, but I'd like to propose something else for your consideration. Harold raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. What if we created something new? I leaned forward slightly. A wellness brand built from the ground up with modern supply chain efficiency. No legacy systems, no outdated thinking. As I outlined my vision, I saw Harold's expression shift from sympathy to interest. Interesting, he said when I finished. Very interesting indeed. 2 weeks after my termination, I received a call from Catherine, my former assistant. Diane, have you heard what's happening here? She whispered, clearly calling from somewhere private within the Silverstone offices. What's going on? I asked, settling into my home office chair. It's chaotic. Jillian's implementing all these changes simultaneously. New packaging, reformulated products, different marketing approaches. And now there's talk about distribution problems. I maintained a neutral tone. Distribution problems? Yes. Apparently, CoreLogics isn't being cooperative about Jillian's cost-cutting demands. They're saying the current contract must be honored until expiration, and they're not accepting the new terms Jillian proposed. This wasn't news to me. Harold had kept me informed about Jillian's increasingly aggressive approach to renegotiating terms, including her threat to explore alternative distribution options if CoreLogics wouldn't accommodate her demands. That sounds challenging, I replied diplomatically. The board called an emergency meeting yesterday. Jillian tried to keep it quiet, but I heard her secretary scheduling it. Something about supply chain contingencies. After thanking Catherine for the update, I spent the afternoon reaching out to my industry contacts. The wellness product landscape had changed dramatically in recent years, with consumers increasingly demanding transparency, sustainability, and authentic stories behind their purchases. This created a perfect opening for a new entrant with the right approach, and without the baggage of an established brand trying to reinvent itself. Later that week, I met with Andrew Lambert, a brilliant product developer who had been sidelined at Silverstone during Jillian's reorganization. Like me, he had been labeled as insufficiently forward-thinking, despite his track record of successful innovations. How are you holding up, Andrew? I asked, as we settled at a quiet corner table in a local coffee shop. He shrugged. They moved me to special projects, which means I have no real responsibilities anymore. I'm essentially being paid to do nothing until they find a reason to let me go. What would you say to starting fresh somewhere else? I asked carefully. Andrew's eyes lit up. Depends on where and with whom. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was a preliminary business plan for Evergreen Wellness, a new company focused on personalized wellness products with sustainable sourcing and transparent manufacturing processes. I'm assembling a team, I explained. People who understand this industry but aren't afraid to reinvent how things are done. I need a product development leader. Andrew studied the materials carefully. This is impressive, Diane. But starting from scratch, the investment required would be substantial. I have investors lined up, I said, not mentioning that the primary investor was myself through Meadowlark Ventures. And I've secured preliminary distribution capabilities. Again, I kept CoreLogics' involvement vague. By the time we finished our coffee, Andrew had agreed to join Evergreen Wellness as soon as he could gracefully exit Silverstone. Over the next 2 weeks, I recruited 4 more key team members, all experienced professionals who had either been pushed out by Jillian or were growing increasingly dissatisfied under her leadership. Each brought valuable expertise and industry connections. Meanwhile, Silverstone's distribution challenges were intensifying. Through my industry network, I learned that major retailers were receiving notice that Silverstone deliveries might face disruptions in the coming months. This was standard practice when a distribution contract was at risk. CoreLogic was legally obligated to inform retail partners of potential supply chain changes. The notifications sent ripples of concern through the retail community. Buyers began reaching out to Silverstone for reassurance, only to receive vague responses that further eroded confidence. Precisely as I had anticipated, Jillian's cost-cutting strategy was backfiring spectacularly. By trying to pressure CoreLogic into accepting less favorable terms, she had destabilized Silverstone's most critical business relationship. 1 month after my departure from Silverstone, I received an unexpected visitor. Monica Reynolds, chairwoman of Silverstone's board of directors, called asking to meet privately. We had always maintained a cordial professional relationship, though she had ultimately supported Jillian's decision to restructure the executive team. We met at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of Dallas. Monica looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for meeting me, Diane," she said after we ordered. "I imagine you're not feeling particularly charitable toward Silverstone right now." "I spent 25 years building that company," I replied evenly. "My feelings are complex." She nodded. "That's exactly why I'm here. We have a situation, and I think you might be the only person who can help us understand it." "What situation is that?" I asked, though I had a good idea. Monica leaned forward. "Our distribution network is falling apart. CoreLogic has formally notified us that they won't be renewing their contract when it expires in 3 months. They've also rejected all proposed modifications to the existing agreement." I kept my expression neutral. "That sounds challenging." "It's more than challenging. It's potentially catastrophic. We've approached 6 other distribution companies. None can match CoreLogic's capabilities, especially their temperature-controlled facilities for our plant-based products." "What does Jillian say about all this?" I asked, genuinely curious about how my replacement was handling the crisis. Monica's expression darkened. "She insists we can build our own distribution network, but the board has seen the numbers. It would take 2 years and millions in capital expenditure to create something comparable. We don't have that kind of time or money." "So why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I knew exactly why. "You built our partnership with CoreLogic from the ground up. They trusted you. Harold Peters won't even take Jillian's calls anymore, but I'm betting he'd talk to you." Monica looked at me hopefully. "Would you consider acting as a consultant to help salvage this relationship?" The irony was almost too perfect. Jillian had pushed me out for fresh perspectives, and now the board wanted my help to fix the mess she had created. "I'm flattered that you thought of me," I said carefully, "but I've actually been quite busy with a new venture." "A new venture?" Monica looked surprised. "Yes. I'm launching a wellness brand called Evergreen Wellness. We're focusing on personalized nutrition supplements with sustainable sourcing." I smiled. "In fact, we've already secured nationwide distribution." "With CoreLogic?" Monica asked, connecting the dots immediately. I nodded. "Among others." The color drained from Monica's face as she realized the implications. "Diane, is there something I should know about your relationship with CoreLogic?" "I've always had excellent professional relationships with our business partners," I replied noncommittally. Before Monica could press further, my phone buzzed with a message from Harold. "Riverstream Retail interested in Evergreen products. Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Available?" Riverstream was one of Silverstone's largest retail customers, representing nearly 15% of their total sales. The fact that they were already exploring alternatives was telling. "I should get going," I said, signaling for the check. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." As we parted ways, Monica looked defeated. "Diane, if you reconsider helping us with CoreLogic, the board would be extremely grateful." I smiled politely. "I'll keep that in mind. But as I said, I'm quite focused on my new venture now. Sometimes fresh perspectives are exactly what the market needs. The hint of my own words being turned back against Silverstone wasn't lost on Monica. Her expression told me she finally understood that her company's distribution crisis was no accident. The following week brought news that sent shockwaves through the wellness industry. Jillian Ames, in a desperate attempt to solve Silverstone's distribution crisis, had announced an ambitious plan to build their own distribution network. The announcement included a substantial capital raise, diluting existing shareholders' value, and projected an 18-month timeline for completion. Silverstone's stock dropped 17% in a single day. I watched the developments with detached interest while focusing on building Evergreen Wellness. We had secured office space in a modern building in downtown Dallas, assembled a core team of 15 experienced professionals, many former Silverstone employees, and finalized our initial product line of personalized nutritional supplements. Our partnership with CoreLogics gave us a significant advantage. With Harold's support, we had designed our supply chain to maximize efficiency from the beginning, rather than trying to retrofit outdated systems as Silverstone had done for years. Just as we were finalizing our launch plans, I received another unexpected call, this time from Benjamin Wright, Silverstone's founder who had retired 5 years earlier. Though no longer involved in day-to-day operations, he still held a significant ownership stake and served as chairman emeritus. "Diane," he said when I answered, "I need to see you. It's important." We met at his sprawling ranch outside Dallas, where he had retreated to enjoy his retirement. At 72, Benjamin still had the sharp mind and direct manner that had made him a successful entrepreneur. "What the hell is happening to my company?" he demanded after we settled in his study. "The stock is tanking, retailers are nervous, and now I hear CoreLogics is cutting ties. You built that relationship. What's going on?" I explained how Jillian had systematically pushed out experienced executives, including myself, in pursuit of her vision for a younger, more innovative leadership team. "Damn foolishness," Benjamin muttered. "Experience matters in this business. Always has." Then came the question I had been anticipating. "And what's this I hear about you starting a competing company? With CoreLogics's backing, no less?" I met his gaze evenly. "I invested in CoreLogics years ago, Benjamin. It was a personal financial decision, fully disclosed according to Silverstone's policies on outside investments. As for Evergreen Wellness, yes, I'm launching a new brand. After being pushed out of Silverstone, I wasn't ready to retire." Benjamin studied me thoughtfully. "You know, I always told the board they underestimated you. You were never just the partnerships person. You understood the whole business, end to end." He leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, Diane, did you orchestrate this distribution crisis?" "I made investments and career choices that protected my interests," I replied carefully. "Just as you taught me to do." A slow smile spread across Benjamin's face. "Well played." He sat back in his chair. "So what happens now? Silverstone's on the ropes, and you're positioned to deliver the knockout punch." "That depends," I said. "Evergreen is my priority now, but I have no desire to see Silverstone destroyed. Too many good people still work there." Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. "The board's called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. They're discussing Jillian's future." He fixed me with an intense gaze. "If changes were made at the top, significant changes, would there be any possibility of salvaging the CoreLogics relationship?" I considered this carefully. I can't speak for CoreLogics. They're making business decisions based on their own interests. But new leadership might create an opportunity for a fresh conversation. Benjamin smiled at my deliberate use of the term fresh conversation. I still have some influence with the board. Perhaps it's time I made a few calls. As I drove home, I realized that the situation had evolved beyond my original expectations. What had begun as a simple story of comeuppance was developing into something more complex. A potential industry realignment, where I held significant leverage. The headline in the Dallas Business Journal said it all. Silverstone Naturals CEO ousted after distribution crisis. Founder returns as interim leader. Just 3 months after pushing me out, Jillian Ames had been terminated by the same board that had once championed her fresh perspectives. Benjamin Wright had emerged from retirement to stabilize the company he founded, immediately announcing a return to core values and a renewed focus on key business relationships. I received the news via multiple text messages from former colleagues, each expressing various degrees of satisfaction at this turn of events. Catherine, my former assistant, was particularly jubilant. "Justice! When are you coming back?" But I had no intention of returning to Silverstone. Evergreen Wellness was 1 week away from our official launch, and we had already secured commitments from retailers representing over 60% of our projected first-year sales targets. My phone rang, Benjamin Wright calling. "I assume you've heard the news," he said without preamble. "I have. Congratulations on your return." "It's temporary," he said. "Just until we right the ship, which brings me to the reason for my call. I need to meet with Harold Peters. Today, if possible." "I can't speak for Harold," I replied. "But you can facilitate an introduction," Benjamin countered. "Diane, I'm not asking you to abandon your new venture, but there's no reason our companies can't coexist in the marketplace. Competition is healthy. Destruction isn't." He was right, of course. My goal had never been to destroy Silverstone, only to demonstrate the consequences of undervaluing experience and loyalty. "I'll reach out to Harold," I conceded. "But the decision will be his." "That's all I'm asking," Benjamin said. "And Diane, for what it's worth, the board now understands exactly what they lost when they let you go." It was a small victory, but a satisfying one nonetheless. 1 month later, I stood on a stage at the Natural Products Expo in Anaheim, California, introducing Evergreen Wellness to the industry. The response was overwhelming. Our booth had been consistently packed with interested retailers, media representatives, and potential partners. "Our approach is personalization without compromise," I explained to the audience of industry professionals. "We believe wellness isn't one size fits all, and neither should our products be." From my position on stage, I could see Silverstone's significantly smaller booth across the exhibition hall. Benjamin Wright was there, along with a notably more diverse executive team that included several reinstated veterans alongside some of Jillian's more sensible hires. Following our launch, Silverstone and CoreLogics had indeed reached a new agreement. Not as favorable as their original contract, but enough to prevent complete disruption of Silverstone's business. Harold had made the decision independently, though I suspect my suggestion that industry diversity was healthy had influenced his thinking. After my presentation, Benjamin approached me with an extended hand. "Impressive launch," he said sincerely. "You've assembled a remarkable team." "Thank you," I replied, accepting his handshake. "How are things at Silverstone?" "Stabilizing. The board has approved a more realistic timeline for building our complementary distribution network, while maintaining CoreLogics for critical products." He smiled ruefully. "We're calling it a hybrid approach now, rather than a crisis response." I couldn't help but smile. Perspective matters. "Indeed it does," Benjamin agreed. "We've learned that the hard way." He paused. "Jillian Ames has taken a position with a small startup in Seattle. I hear they're very excited about her fresh perspectives." We both laughed at the irony. As Benjamin walked away, Andrew joined me at our booth. "Was that awkward?" he asked. "Not at all," I replied. "It feels like appropriate closure." In business, as in life, true victory isn't about destruction, it's about validation. My journey from company loyalist to successful competitor had come full circle, not in bitterness, but in vindication of my worth.